Welcome to the Cage Nation. Welcome to the Cage Nation. No one can drop us, no one can stop us. We are the warriors, no one can top us, no one can rock us. We are the warriors, no one can drop us, no one can stop us. We are the warriors, no one can top us, no one can rock us. We are the warriors.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, the big fella, Mr. Albert Miller, and I've got a really special guest on the phone with me right now. The Wolverine Ethan Goss, King of the Cage veteran, but most importantly, Central Pennsylvania's hometown boy. He has fought the fights that brought MMA forefront and notice to Central Pennsylvania. Ethan, how you doing today, brother?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, man. How you doing?
Well, you know, I miss back home. You know, like I moved to North Carolina, and I see that there's a lot of really cool stuff coming to the area, and it kind of bums me out that everyone had to wait till I was leaving to do that kind of cool shit. But you know, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, I was kind of really surprised when I heard you were leaving. I didn't know what that was all about. I mean, I haven't seen you in a while, but
well, it was something I had to do. It was something I'm glad I did, and I got to expand Cage Nation TV. But I think this week in particular, I'm feeling really nostalgic, and I was going back through some old fights that I called. And if you watch Cage Nation TV, I think like episode 3 or 4 was WCC6's recap, and our first interview we ever did on Cage Nation TV was Ethan the Wolverine Goss. Would you believe that?
I didn't know it was the first interview for Cage Nation. That's pretty cool.
The very first interview, and so now
I hold a couple first in Altoona MMA.
I'm sorry?
I said I hold a couple first-time things in Altoona MMA. I was actually the first ever advanced rules fight in Altoona history.
Was that O'Neal or against Bard?
That was actually against Wally Hess.
Oh, I remember. That was complete. That was CDMMA 9. That was a fun night.
Yeah, put on one of my better performances that night.
So, Ethan, I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of live down like how really important that the Central Pennsylvania fight scene was, especially with Bellator talking about coming in, and really talk about some of the adventures you've been in. First time I ever saw you fight was against CDMMA 8. And I think what no one really knew at the time was it was a state college fighter against a state college fighter when you fought Dan O'Neal.
Yeah.
And that was a really good fight. But I want to ask you, like, you got drilled in the groin and you recovered incredibly fast. Like, do you plan for that kind of stuff? Like, how did you get back into the game so quickly after getting fouled like that?
It's just part of the moment, man. It's one of them things when you're in there. You don't want people to think you're a bitch while you're in there. So if you take the full 5 minutes, even if it's still hurting, and then people start to think you're a sissy or whatever. But no, I mean, it's just you got to suck it up. You know what I mean? That's just what happens. Shit like that happens. It wasn't on purpose. I know Dan really well. Him and I actually become really good friends after that fight and actually trained together some. And, it wasn't on purpose. But shit like that happens. It was just an accident. And when you're in there, it sucks at the moment. But you just got to suck it up and take and get back in there.
Now, the fight with O'Neal, like, these are the formative years for the Wolverine. I think before even anyone was calling you the Wolverine. But
yes.
At this time, you're training with Team Titan PA. And at Team Titan PA, I don't know, you guys have had some pretty big alumni coming through. Of course, Tyler the Daywalker Saltzman, but also Ed Ruth and Phil Davis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they originally started there when it was a Lionheart gym under Chad Dugan, I believe.
Yeah.
That was where they originally started at. And I know they brought like John Jones in to work out and stuff, and Dominic Cruz was there. People that were there before my time. I mean, like you said, there were some serious alumni there. At one point in time before my time, they were up for Gym of the Year in NAAFS because they had 3 guys ranked number 1 in the nation under the NAAFS national scene there.
Mike Putnam was one of them, right?
What's that?
Mike Putnam was one of those heavy hitters.
Mike Putnam, which I'll actually break the news that he's on the Bellator card as well.
Oh, okay, all right. Now Bellator's clearly not playing around when it comes to Central Pennsylvania guys being on the card.
Yeah.
Ethan, I used to work across the parking lot from Lionheart, and I would see guys pushing like the tractor tires Up and down Garner Street. Like, what was is that like a sample of the training, or was that something extreme, or what kind of?
A lot of that was the CrossFit stuff they got going on in there. A lot of the MMA stuff. I mean, we would go out and run, or like Mike and I, we would go over to the Bryce Jordan Center, or at the track and field over there, and work out in the field and hit mitts in the sand pit and all that stuff. But that was mostly probably the CrossFit guys doing the work over there.
It's still incredibly impressive to see. And I mean, when you walk in that building, you know that hard work is done.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. There's a lot of work that goes on in there.
So you fight Dan O'Neill, you get the decision, you introduce yourself to Altoona. Your fight before that was against Tyler Feist, but Dan O'Neill was your first introduction to Central Pennsylvania mixed martial arts. After that, you're fighting a fight in Greensburg, Pennsylvania against brawling Donnie Bard, and Donnie Bard was fighting out of the Team Fractured. And this was the fight that I discovered that Ethan Goss is not just gym strong, he's got like that farm boy strength, like Petersburg farm boy strength behind him too. I feel like I remember there was a point in time where Bard shoots him for a single, and you just start hitting him in the side of the temple.
Yeah, that was a fight for me. So I got a little bit of criticism from the fight before with O'Neill about not people were saying that I didn't have any stand up. I was just a wrestler or just a ground guy or whatever. And that was a fight for me where I wanted to show people that this is who I am and this is what I do. So I kind of went out there, and some of my training partners and coaches still talk about it. They say I had a weird look in my eye that night. I had a glazed over look in my eye. It was just one of those things where, I mean, it didn't matter what he was going to throw at me. I was just going to throw back harder and stronger and hit him better.
I was actually cage side for that fight. I did commentary, and Donnie Bard is he's not a pushover kid. And, you know, this is where Ethan Goss is starting to get the introduction to the Pittsburgh fight scene. So, you know, Doug Yasinski from World Cage Fighting Championships, great promoter, puts on a lot of great fights. And then you're fighting Julian Ramos. Yeah, actually, as soon as I walked out of the cage that night in Greensburg, Joe D'Amore shook my hand and offered me to come to Pinnacle. And he wanted me to come over to Pinnacle to fight. And, I mean, I pretty much booked my next fight as soon as I stepped out of the cage that night against Julian Ramos. Yeah, okay, now, Ramos, obviously incredibly tough because Pennsylvania will not allow for mixed matches. And Ethan is a pro fighter. I want to kind of have you give an idea of what Bellator should be expecting with the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission as far as quality of fights because they will not allow for mixed matches. Pennsylvania
is a very, very strict state. I mean, Greg Serb runs a really, really tight program. A lot of people complain about it, but to be honest with you, man, if you just do what he wants and be respectful, yes, sir, no, sir. Greg's a pretty good guy. He's never given me any hard times or anything like that. But once again, I mean, I do what he wants. He's the man in charge, and he's the guy that can end your career in the snap of a finger. So that's the guy that you want to listen to and be in charge of. But I mean, he's been known to do some crazy shit. I mean, how the stories of him even going into a cage and ripping one fighter off another fighter.
I remember that one. Did you ever see the movie Rocky Balboa?
Oh, yeah, who hasn't?
Okay, you know the part where Rocky Balboa is going before the State Athletic Commission in Philly, and he's trying to be like, oh man, I should be able to fight, even though he's like really old, and they're like considering it. Every time I see that, I have to chuckle to myself because I know that if Greg Serb was sitting there, he would have been like, Mr. Balboa, I'm sorry, but you're not fighting. The end.
He probably wouldn't even have said he was sorry. He just would have said, no, you're not fighting. You're done in the discussion.
Oh Lord, every time I see that, I can think, like, you know, Hollywood's great, and Sylvester Stallone's done a lot of great stuff for boxing, but Greg Serb would have not allowed, even entertain the conversation, I feel like. So you get a hard-fought decision over Julian Ramos, and you're coming back to Central Pennsylvania to fight a Complete Devastation MMA 9. Now, for those of you listening at home, we got the win over O'Neill, the win over Bard, the win over Ramos, and now you're fighting Walter Hess.
Yeah, this is where the career gets this is where it gets tricky, and this is where I actually got my recognition was starting with the Altoona fight in against Walter Hess. From there, I mean, we trained for that fight. Actually, Wally wasn't supposed to be my opponent until a week out.
Oh, really?
I can't remember who the guy was supposed to fight, but he ended up, he wouldn't get back to the matchmaker, which was Ryan Blunt at the time. And Doug Yazinski had a show that got canceled. It was supposed to be the week before. And it ended up getting canceled for some reason. I think too many fighters pulled out. They had an injury bug or something on the show. And Wally actually was on that show. And since the show got canceled, they recruited him to come over to fight me for CDMMA.
Was that the WCC fight where Charlie and Tyler would fight?
Charlie and
Tyler Saltzman.
Who?
The WCC fight that got canceled. Was that the one where Saltzman and Gathers were supposed to fight?
No. That was the night they were supposed to fight was Mayhem on the Mountain.
Okay, but then they got signed to WCC. That fight fell through, and then Complete Devastation picked him up.
You know what? I don't know that for sure.
Okay,
I
okay.
don't think so at the time, because I think Tyler was out in San Francisco then.
Okay, all right. So Walter Hess supposed to fight for WCC. That card falls through. He signs with Complete Devastation.
Yes, me and Wally met on 5 days' notice, basically. And in the meantime, I was in talks with Pinnacle as well. They wanted me to come out and fight on their card, but I was already booked and signed to fight for CDMMA. So they were Pinnacle was trying to do a tournament thing where they wanted two guys to fight, and then have another two set of guys fight, and then the winner fight each other for the title. What happened was I finished Wally in the beginning of the second round. I stepped out of the cage, and it wasn't even an hour after the fight with Wally Hess, I accepted to fight Rich Cantolina for the Pinnacle Featherweight Championship, which was 10 days away, because that would have been the Thanksgiving Eve card, so that fight would have been, the Pinnacle fight was on a Wednesday, and I fought 10 days before that in Altoona, so I fought twice in 10 days there.
Now, again, people listening at home, this, and Ethan's right on the money, this is where things start getting really interesting. This fight against Walter Hess was the first one that Complete Devastation held at the Jaffa Mosque. And the fight before, against Dan O'Neill in Altoona, was big. But I think the people you had in attendance with you, Ethan, were absolutely out of their minds. I mean, like, it was so loud. My commentary booth was so loud. I mean, it was hard to hear what I was saying to Drew, who was sitting, not even a foot away from me. I mean, everyone's wearing orange Wolverine shirts. Like, you really brought a crowd with you, and they were extremely vocal.
Yeah, I got a big group of friends. And some of my friends are crazier than I am. I actually remember them rushing the cage that night after I won, and I remember them throwing over a shirt over the cage and me catching it and to put it on and stuff. And then there was a guy standing out there in the crowd without his T-shirt on and standing there with his shirt on.
And that's
I remember that. Yeah, I think like I said, I think I had like 200 people there or something.
Oh, it was something ridiculous, and it really surprised me the volume of people wearing Wolverine shirts, because we all showed up at the Jaffa Mosque at like around like 2 or 3, getting ready for weigh-ins, and it was you and your team, and then it seemed like after that fight, everyone from Petersburg, like the town of Petersburg, was empty because they were at the Jaffa Mosque that night.
Yeah.
It was absolutely empty. So, now, there's always an interesting story I'd like to tell. I'm not going to name names, but you were kind of rushed into your bout, and you didn't have the time to prepare because of a fighter dropping off, 5 minutes before he was supposed to go into the cage?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, I'll never forget it.
It was actually supposed to be a fight before me, and then intermission, and then me.
Yeah.
The fighter before me did not make it to the cage, and the bout got canceled. What they did to me then was tell me, I didn't even start warming up yet. I figured I was going to start warming up during that fight in intermission. And what they did to me was they said, "Goss, you're up, go." And I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute." And they told me about the fight that fell through, and I was just kind of like, "Oh, shit." So I got up to the stage, and they were pretty much rushing me, like, "Go, go, go." And I remember turning around, and I don't even remember who it was that I looked at. or said anything, dude. I said, I am not going nowhere until my fucking music hits. I remember my coach or one of my training partners standing there at the time turned and looked at me, and he said, yes. Actually, my coach now, Jason Dignan, he said that was like his first memory of me, because he said he remembered being there when I said that, and him saying, I like that kid.
Well, there was a lot of sound issues that night, because I think Schoenfeld fought Ted Worthington, and like Worthington's music was sped up like twice as fast, so there was a lot of music issues. So the really cool thing about this one is you were pretty much going into the fight against Wally Hess cold. Like, you didn't have a chance to warm up properly. But you didn't complain, you just went out there and you did business.
Yeah, one thing, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. You know what I mean? I can't prolong it. I can't say, no, I'm not doing it. I had to go out and do what I had to do. Granted, if it wasn't wasn't the right time, or something was screwed up or whatever, you got to take what's there and go with it. But you said about the music, they actually screwed up my song too, because it started in the middle and then it stopped while I was walking to the cage and then restarted over again.
Jeez.
They didn't have a walkway like roped off.
You guys were coming right through the crowd.
Yeah, they didn't have a walkway roped off, and we was coming to the crowd, and I remember I was walking down to the crowd, and there was these people standing there in the middle of where I had to, like the half makeshift aisle. And I remember them looking at me, and I remember I was already heated at the time, and I looked at this. I knew some lady. I looked at her and was like, "Move."
So you got a really nice submission victory over Wally Hess. We've established that this is where you get your first experience with the Dignan clan. You're going into a 4-fight winning streak, and then you're going into a fight with Pittsburgh that's going to start off a series. It's probably the most important fight series, amateur-wise, in my memory of Central Pennsylvania mixed martial arts. So before all this, the only fight in Altoona, or not Altoona, but State College was Mayhem on the Mountain, and they only had the one show. The next one closer would have been Pennsylvania Fighting Championships, which is in Harrisburg. So, I mean, like, this whole fight circuit is depending on this fight series. And I think it did it really well. You fight Rich Cantolina at Pittsburgh Challenge Series 5?
I think it was 5.
And it was a title fight. And it was an incredible title fight.
It was on 10 days' notice. Richie he had like a 14 fights or something like that.
A very extensive amateur career.
Yeah, he was very, very experienced. Much more experienced than I did coming into the fight. And Richie, I only had 5 fights. And I kind of went out to Pittsburgh some people remembered me from the Ramos fight, but to be honest with you, it was kind of a boring fight looking back at it, me watching it now with Julian Ramos. But the fight with Rich was the one that set my brand name. It was the one that made me a prize fighter.
Absolutely.
I went out there in 10 days' notice and stepped in the ring with Rich. And I remember that was right around the time Diego Sanchez fought Gilbert Melendez, and I remember watching the fight before I fought Rich, and I remember saying to myself, I'm going to put on a show. I'm just going to stand here, and we're going to throw down. And that was pretty much how it went. And Richie and I put on one hell of a back and forth show. We ended up getting Fight of the Year for it under Pinnacle named us Fight of the Year, Amateur Fight of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
And, we had a bunch of other people that got wind of it, and people that, I've had people from across the world. I had a guy in England that seen the video on YouTube and messaged me over it. And, it blew up. It got like 1,000 views in 24 hours or something like that.
Yikes.
It was a hell of a fight. And a lot of people thought I won. A lot of people thought Rich won. So it was one of them things that we was eventually going to have to run back.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Ethan, prior to Complete Devastation MMA 9, after Complete Devastation MMA 9, Pittsburgh really took notice of these Altoona fighters. Obviously, you're going to fight Rich. Brett Schoenfeld's going to fight at Gladiators of the Cage.
Charlie Gathers as well.
Yep, Charlie Gathers.
Him, and then there was also Cody Carlin.
Yep, all these guys.
We'll get into him later here.
Oh, absolutely. We're getting to that one. But after, like, you know, your fight with Cantolina, it's showing, like, hey, Central Pennsylvania, Altoona, the Penn State region clearly has some contenders. That was the fight series that made everyone take notice. And I mean, these guys are going off to bigger cities and bigger fights. I mean, even Brad Mountain going off to, like, you know, the Carolinas and fighting in bigger stages. Did that ever add any pressure to you at all, or was it still just going into fight in beast mode?
No, man. I mean, I never thought of it like that. It was just, it was more or less, you know, I don't want to sound selfish, but I was thinking of it about myself, like thinking for me, like I need to go out and I need to make a name. I need to make my name. I need to build up my brand. These other guys that were there, yeah, it was awesome to have other fighters that were being notoriously known for going out and fighting, and a lot of other exciting fighters, but it never put any extra pressure on me.
Coming out of the fight with Cantolina, you fight Jarrell Hodge, who has kind of a play. I mean, he fought Cantolina, dropped a hard-fought loss there. You get back to Joshua Espinoza, but leading into May of 2014, Gladiators of the Cage was promoting in Johnstown. You had an opponent, but that opponent dropped out.
Yes. Well, first let me go back to the Hodge fight. This is where at the Jarrell Hodge fight, everybody thought I was crazy for this one. Jarrell was the beast from Ohio, the guy that was the best in the region. So people thought he was the best in the nation.
Oh, he's practically an assassin, especially out of the Ohio area.
He was the guy, because he was the guy that knocked out Cody Garbrandt, who's obviously now the UFC bantamweight world champion.
Okay.
Everybody thought I was crazy for this move, but my mentality and my mindset going into these amateur fights was fight the best there is, and anywhere they wanted to fight, for any state, any place, it didn't matter. I was just going out there to get the experience. I was fighting the best of the best. And that gave me a lot of respect from people, because I just come off a loss to Richie, and I stepped up and took on Hodge, who was one of the best guys in the region, possibly even the nation. And
it was a title fight too.
Yes, it was. It was a title fight. I lost that fight as well. I showed some moments in that fight. I hurt Jarrell in the third round, and I got all excited, and I thought I was going to finish the fight, but it ended up not working out that way. But after Jarrell, I ended up going to Toledo, Ohio, to fight Josh Espinoza, and this fight was on 4 days' notice as well.
Yikes!
I actually had to cut 20 pounds in 4 days and drive 7 hours to Toledo, Ohio, and fight Josh in his hometown, which at the time he was 6-0 with all first-round finishes. And the funny thing is, since I took it on such a short notice and it was so far away, I had no cornerman. I had nobody to go with me. I had a buddy of mine that I texted and see if he wanted to go. And he drove me up, and I actually contacted Jarrell, of all people, the guy that just beat me, and because he was from Ohio, and I said, yeah, I asked him if they had any guys on the card, and he said, no. I asked him what was up. I told him what was going on. He's like, I'll be there to corner you.
Nice.
But Jarrell Hodge actually cornered me for that fight, and that's why I got a lot of respect for Jarrell. Yeah, him and I, we've been pretty good ever since we fought too. But yeah, and it was a roller coaster of events in the amateur career, I should say. Yeah,
well, I think a lot of people, especially in the central Pennsylvania region, had the mentality that it's kind of like a WWE mindset. Like, oh my God, you fought a guy once and you guys are blood enemies for life. No, you beat the snot out of each other, and the next thing you know, like, you find this newfound respect for them. And I think, and speaking of Jarrell Hodge, you drop a loss, but he's going to corner you. And I think our next fight we're going to talk about is, I think, that ultimate demonstration of what it's like to get into a fight and then come out with one of the best training partners I think you could ask for.
Yeah, exactly. The next fight was for Gladiators of the Cage in Johnstown.
You were scheduled to fight for the amateur featherweight championship.
Yeah, so I was scheduled to fight Derek Wright for the featherweight championship. And the week of the fight, Derek pulled out with the doctors wouldn't clear him because it was something with his jaw, because he had his jaw broken prior to that.
Yikes.
And they wouldn't clear him with that. So technically it wasn't his fault that the fight got canceled. It obviously would have been nice to know if it was a little more time in advance. But
sure.
So we were 5 days out and we're looking for a fight. I was scheduled to fight for their championship. I think I was to be their. Yeah, I think I was their amateur main event. But I was scheduled to fight for that championship. That didn't happen. I got a text message saying, "Will you fight Cody Karlheim for the 155-pound championship?" Now, Cody and I obviously knew of each other. Cody was the top guy in the region.
Yeah.
Before I come in, and Cody suffered a knee injury.
One of the worst, I think, it was like the GSP knee injury is how bad it was. I mean, it was severe.
He was out for 16 months, actually.
Jeez.
But, he suffered a knee injury that put him out, and while he was out is when I come to the scene. But so it was kind of a given where Cody and I had to meet. And we met on 5 days' notice and went up a weight class. I agreed to go up a weight class because he had 5 days to cut weight. From there, Cody and I went out and we had an awesome fight. I ended up getting my hand raised by a decision in the end of it and winning the Gladiators of the Cage lightweight championship. But in today's world, Cody is one of my best friends. Cody has kind of made the transfer from fighter to coach. So he is one of my coaches now, and he is one of my best friends, and he is one of my best training partners that I could ever ask for.
Oh, I can't.
We see each other weekly. I mean, we talk to each other almost daily. So, I mean, him and I have become the closest that we could ever become.
Well, speaking of Cody Karlheim, and we've covered a lot about how really important your fights are to the central Pennsylvania region. You made your debut at CDMMA 8, where Karlheim was supposed to fight Zach Schultz for the CDMMA Feather Amateur Championship. He was not able to make that fight. Rich Cantolina stepped in. So that kind of ties everyone's fate together in a really exciting way. And that fight in Johnstown against Karlheim, I think, was an incredible bout and showed a lot of skill between both of you.
Yeah, I mean, Cody's known for his groundwork, and still to this day, he's a freak on the ground. I mean, I've been training with him for close to 3 years now, and I mean, I can count on one hand how many times I was able to submit him.
Well, I think the one technique that sticks out in my mind between you and Cody Karlheim, and Cody Karlheim is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a ground wizard. Like, I'm a huge guy. I would never ever be like, "Hey, Cody, let's roll," because I like my jaw being in place.
Yeah.
But the one technique that sticks in my mind is the Haraya Goshi you threw, the hip throw. And
Actually, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know what the name of the throw was. I just, I was always kind of an upper body wrestler and stuff, and that just happened. I threw a really shitty left hand that went over Cody's head, and he bum rushed forward. And when he did, I just dropped down with a whizzer, and I went to the outside trip. And next thing I know, Cody went for a ride. I landed on top and screwed myself because I tried to pull a guillotine then right away, and he ended up on top. But that move actually made the news. I mean, it was on the Channel 6 News.
Yeah, you know what? You and I were both on the Channel 6 News that night because I called that fight on like half hour's notice. So
I do remember that actually.
It's always been always been awesome to call your fights. I mean, you always expect something, and you're always pleasantly surprised. Now, you won the lightweight amateur championship for Gladiators of the Cage. Did you vacate the title immediately, or how'd that go?
No, I held on to the title. I was still their champion, and this is where the string of bad events started, which everybody's going to face adversity in whatever career you're in, but this is where it started getting tougher for me. My next fight was against Jake Schilling in Pittsburgh, which Jake is a big, strong kid.
A very thick neck, like
boulder.
Yeah.
And I went out to Pittsburgh and fought Jake, and I was doing extremely well in the fight. I was leading the fight in the second round, still leading the fight. Was able to get Jake down. I stuffed all his takedowns. Was able to take him down. Finished the first round on top. Second round come out. I was able to take him down again. and I believe I hit a lateral drop on him. When I did, I got caught. He hit the most beautiful triangle choke that I've ever been hit with off that lateral drop. I still to this day don't even know how it really worked out, but he was able to catch me. And so I suffered a loss again that night. And the next fight after that was back in Altoona. And it was one of the biggest amateur fights. Probably the biggest fight that ever went down in Altoona history.
Yep, the single fight.
It was a rematch with Rich Cantolina for the Speedy MMA championship that he held by beating Zach Schultz.
I'm trying to think who the main event was that night.
Charlie Gathers was the main
Greg
event.
Salmonig. Josh Aarons. I'm sorry. He was fighting Josh Aarons. And,
that was the guy's name.
And Chuck is a great main eventer. You know, like I've always called him Altoona's favorite son, but I think the bout with you and Richie Cantolina, that's the one people came to see. You know, like, because again, all those orange shirts.
Chuck, they kind of stole a little bit of steam from the rest of the show. And no on you, Chuck and I are friends, and Chuck and I train together and stuff too. But it's stole a little bit of steam from the pro portion of the card, and we were being billed as the main event. We were the billboard fight. We were the fight that was on the sign. We were the fight that was talked about. The fight Jim Jay and those guys from Pittsburgh all come out to watch.
Yes, they did.
Getting ready for the Richie fight, the second fight with Richie, man, that was the worst camp I've ever had in my entire life. I had 4 injuries in that camp. I broke my hand in the shilling fight. So I started with a broken hand. Did what I could with that. About a quarter of the way through, I pulled my groin. Did what I could do with that. Still trained. A little bit more. I had a knee injury happen, and I don't even know what happened. It was all swelled up, and I don't even remember anything popping or anything like that in it. And that was a couple weeks with that. And then a week before the Richie fight, at practice, I ended up separating my AC joint in my shoulder.
Jeez. And that fight is still one of the most hotly contested. If there was one fight in Altoona that I think most people disagree on, one way or another, it is Goss versus Cantolina at CDMMA 10.
Yeah.
Half the crowd will tell you that Goss won, half the crowd will tell you that Cantolina won. It was
I still disagree with that fight, but it's behind us now. But it is what it is now. So, but I committed that fight with a bad shoulder, and I was kind of I didn't want to wrestle with him because that was initially how I hurt my shoulder, and so I was like, okay, I'll stand with him. But I also had, and it kind of screwed up my mind because after I tried to hit pads after hurting my shoulder in the training camp, and if I'd overextend or miss, it was just a god awful pain. And from there, I was a little, I would say, timid on my feet. Not timid, but
cautious,
relaxed. I didn't want to pull the trigger. And I remember right at the end of the first round, Richie hit me with a Superman punch.
Yeah.
Hell. And I kind of had longer hair at the time, so my hair flew out of the way and everything. But hit me with a Superman punch from hell, and I was like, okay, it's time to wake the fuck up now.
Yeah. That fight, again, incredibly important to bring in a lot of notice to the Altoona area. It was one of those fight series amongst a lot of other fights that were incredibly important. It's the reason why we had fights like Gathers versus Saltzman that were so important, why Rich Cantolina versus Ethan Goss was so important. And again, it was orange shirts versus a bunch of guys who've been to the original Permani brothers. That crowd was divided. Okay, Ethan, now you had 2 fights. You turned pro right after that. You fought Lloyd Reyes, lost a decision. But that was your first pro fight, and then you get signed by King of the Cage because of your
split decision to Lloyd, and it was tough. So that was 3 fights in a row I just dropped.
And Lloyd was a very intense guy too. He reminded me of Carl Weathers playing Apollo Creed. There's that intense look in his eye.
He had a very good game plan coming in there for me, and which at the time, and no disrespect to the guys from that I was training with at the time, but I didn't really have coaching. I just had more or less training partners. And I lost the fight to Lloyd, and when I got done with that fight, I walked in the back. I lost a split decision to Lloyd. But I got done with the fight. I walked in the back, and there stood Jason Dignan. He shook my hand and said, "Please come up. Please come train with me." And he said, "I want to put a gi on you." I'm like, because I didn't train gi yet either. I never wore a gi yet. And he's like, "Come on." And I knew I had to make a decision. I had to do something different. And that was when I started under the Dignan Broomball.
So it's after you fought Lloyd Reyes is when you started with Dignan.
Yes.
And Jason Dignan, the head coach of Dignan Broomball MMA, has this way about him of making everyone feel like they could be world champion. You know, like he has such a way of instilling confidence in everybody. And that's why it's so...
He's a very good hype man to begin with. But he puts confidence behind you, but he's honest too.
Yeah, he won't sugarcoat it. He'll tell you suck.
He's going to tell you you're going to have a tough fight.
But you also feel very confident in the instruction he's giving you that, you know, this is how we overcome that. And I really think Jason has a future doing like motivational speaks, like doing TED Talks and stuff like that. I feel like, you know, he's very good at that.
Jason's a very good guy in general. One of the cool little facts about Jason is that he ran a jiu-jitsu program at his house for free. He doesn't charge for it. He doesn't. I mean, he just asks you to come in and take his knowledge that he's given you.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't find that in today's world, especially somebody that's free. But I don't know. No, none of you. I mean, obviously, you don't want to take that for granted from him.
Right.
But Jason's heart and soul is martial arts.
He does it for the love of teaching.
He's an amazing jiu-jitsu guy, a third-degree black belt in judo. And he's got a lot of credentials behind him.
The whole Dignan school is full of killers, Ethan. Let's not sugarcoat that. I remember rolling with Pat Johnson once, and Pat was trying to show me how important it was to keep the sternum-on-sternum contact. And I wrestle for a little bit, you know, like my body mechanics are what they are. But I think at one point I realized I don't think Pat's using his arms a whole lot. Like, he's just keeping pressure just with chest contact. You know, they're all just a bunch of very skilled, very dangerous human beings with great personalities.
Yeah, Pat's a great guy, and he's a dick on the mat. He's one of those guys that he teaches you tough love on the mat. That's Pat for you.
I remember seeing him roll with somebody once, and they started doing something, and Pat said to him, he's like, "Listen, if you stand up, then I'm going to stand up." That person took a knee immediately. They didn't want anything to go there. And I imagine it's that second-degree judo black belt that would have sent him crashing across the room. But it was something else.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we just got a lot of hidden talent up there. There's a lot of talent that people they don't know about because they haven't fought or they fought a long time ago before it was really big or before shit was sanctioned. There's a lot of talent that people don't see that nobody in the area really sees but the guys that train there. I mean, on any given day, we have Pat and Jason are both black belts. Lenny's a brown belt. There's two other brown belts. I'm a purple belt now. There's another purple belt. I mean, there's a room full of studs up there.
Absolutely. And
then you add in Byron Broomball, who's one of the striking coaches. He's more or less the striking coach with Dignan Broomball. And I mean, his ways of striking, they click with me. And Byron's another amazing guy.
Byron's a great guy too.
Like Jason.
Byron's a great guy. And I was talking to my big brother once about the fight scene in Altoona. And I said, "Oh, you know, and Byron." And he's like, "Wait, you mean Byron Broomball?" Apparently my brother worked with Byron before. And my brother, like, you know, he learned from our father, you don't take guff. And he just had that immediate respect for Byron too that you just don't see people offer very often. So Byron is also no joke at all.
No, Beef's one of them. He's a straight shooter. We call him Beef, but he's also the guy that told Kurt Angle to shut up and get away from him one night when they were at a set of fights. I mean, Byron. It doesn't matter to Byron. He doesn't care who you are. If you're going to be a jerk, if you're going to be a dick, he's going to tell you what he thinks.
I love it. Now, the next part of Ethan Goss's career, and I don't know if you know this for certain, Ethan, but I just found out yesterday that if you go on UFC Fight Pass, you can actually watch Ethan the Wolverine Goss fight.
Yeah, it should be on King of the Cage.
Yes. So, you fight for King of the Cage. You have a bout against Jason Alexander. You're only 2 fights in your pro career. Doesn't go the way you wanted. But again, you're still acclimating to new trainers and everything. Now, here's the fight. Go ahead.
Yeah, that fight there. I mean, it was a fight where I was doing amazing into that fight up until the end of the first round, and I got caught in the choke. That was a tough pill to swallow that night, and that was one that really, because that was my 4th drop in a row. Mm-hmm. That was one where I really had to take. I pretty much had to take a week after that fight and be like, come on, is this what you want to do? You got to get your shit together. No, I mean, there's no excuses for going on a string of losses like that. But I mean, my head, I should say, like looking back at it now, my head really wasn't in the right place at the right time. I had a lot of outside distractions, I should say, and things that were making it difficult for me at the time. But Jason and Beef weathered the storm. And, I remember Jason actually saying to me, he texted me after that fight and said, "I won't fail you again. I'm sorry." And, I mean, it wasn't his fault. It was me. I was the one that made the mistake in the ring. Jason took that as it was his mistake. And, from there, it was just, that's when shit changed. My focus changed. Everything I had, everything that I was doing. Everything changed, and like I said, Beef and Jason weathered the storm with me. They both were patient and kept with me. And the next fight was for King of the Cage again, because I actually took the fight with Alexander on 2 weeks' notice. So the matchmaker said he owed me one, so he gave me a fight with Jeremiah Yeager,
which. That's the same Jeremiah Yeager that kind of his fight with Dominic Mazzata really got Mazzata Mania started. That kicker around the world. So you're fighting in very similar fight circles, and you're taking on Jeremiah Yeager, and that was a pretty explosive finish.
Yes, the Yeager fight. Yeager was known as a stand-up guy, but he was a brawler. He would just swing for the fences with everything he had, and. I kind of knew that coming into the fight with him, and he did a lot of mistakes when he fights too. And I remember that whole time we were training for that fight, it was to not back up. And I remember as soon as the fight started, I exchanged a combo, he exchanged it. I remember taking a step back and thinking to myself, I'm trained not to back up, you're not backing up. So he come forward again, and we ended up in the clinch. And I had a Muay Thai plum clinch and spun him to the fence and threw a knee to the body and then the same knee to the head. And when I hit his head, it split his forehead wide open. And the ref stopped the fight because it knocked his mouthpiece out. And I remember Greg Serb looking through the door of the cage, shaking his head no. And it got stopped in 45 seconds of the first round.
Outstanding. And again, listen up, fans of Bellator. What we're seeing here is that Ethan Goss has a TKO victory, a very explosive TKO victory, in the number 3 promotion in the world. You can actually watch him on UFC Fight Pass, and that is huge. Now, after that, you're coming back to a regional promotion, one of my favorites, Gladiators of the Cage. You're fighting Chase Rowden.
Yes.
That was a tough bout for you.
We ended up getting a fight with Rowden, and that was a tough card to get on, too, because actually, if we go back, and you remember this because we shot an interview that night.
Yes. That didn't take because my camera sucked.
March, we were supposed to fight Robert Armstrong, I believe.
That's one where you called him out and you told him you'd come to you. You just tell him where and he'll come to you.
Yeah, he no-showed the weigh-ins.
Oh, jeez.
And I was furious, and I was like, that was pretty much where I made a call out. And I took off work with Pittsburgh, spent a week out in Pittsburgh training with Mark Jericho and those guys out there. And I did a lot to prepare for that fight, and he no-showed the weigh-ins. And so the fight didn't happen. So Gladiators of the Cage got me on their next card, which was in June. And there was I agreed to like 2 or 3 opponents, I believe, and it all fell through. And finally, we got Chase Rowden, who come from Georgia. And this kid is the tallest featherweight I've ever seen in my entire life. I think he was like 6'3".
Tall and lanky, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, he was so long. I mean, if I'd slip his punches, it was like he was too far away for me to hit because he was so long for me slipping his punches. But that was different for me because I didn't really have anybody like that to train with. I didn't have anybody to spar with of that statue there. And so that made it was a little bit of a, once again, I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you it was a boring fight. I mean, it's one fight that I look back on and I'm not like happy about. I wish I would have done a lot of things different that night. But we was able to pull out a pretty decisive decision.
I
mean, it was pretty one-sided, I think, in my opinion.
All the judges agreed.
Yeah, I think it was 32 judges scored at 30-27 and one scored at 29-28 or something like that.
Yeah.
But I was able to pull out a pretty good decision in that fight and got the win. The next fight was the big one.
That's the one where WCC promoted at the baseball stadium.
Yes.
Now, WCC had been a Pittsburgh promotion, Tamaqua and Greenville, but then they moved out closer to Philly at Lancaster, and so now you're fighting in front of a brand new crowd. Up until then, you've been fighting Western Pennsylvania, Ohio. So now you're in front of a brand new crowd.
Yes.
Okay,
and,
now.
Doug kind of reached out to me, and he asked me if I was interested in fighting for his championship. And I was like, okay, yeah, who's it against? And he said Jordan Morales. And I knew the Morales name. I didn't really see him fight, but I remember hearing people talk about him and stuff when he was an amateur. And then he come out from Barbarian Fight Club, which is in Sunbury. His head guy is Tim Bosch, who's one of the top 10 ranked middleweights in the world.
Oh, yes.
UFC. And so he come out of there, and I met him, and we met August 13th of 2016 on home plate at the Lancaster Barnstormer Stadium. And man, what a night that was. I remember showing up to the venue, and it was 110 degrees that day, and humidity was at 100%. And they actually changed because they were afraid of like heat strokes and people overheating and stuff. They changed the rounds. They took a minute away from each round. So instead of me fighting 3 5-minute rounds, it was scheduled for 3 4-minute rounds. And they actually gave each and every one of us the option to not fight if we didn't want to fight. But once again, it's one of the things you got to do what you got to do. You're there. You're not going to bitch out. You're not going to pull out just because it's hot out. But, Jordan and I went out and, I think we were kind of an underrated fight. We weren't talked about much because Sharif Jones and Travis, I can't think of what his last name is, Travis Kramer. They did a lot of talking and stuff for their fight, and so they were kind of getting all the publicity for that show. But I think me and Jordan were an underrated fight that delivered fight of the night category, or we were fight of the night potential that night. I went out and I put on a show, and Jordan did his thing. And looking back at it now, I mean, it was a great fight. And in my opinion, it was a close fight. But Jordan ended up getting a nod that night.
Okay. Now, back in May, which this one's surprised. I didn't realize you fought in May, Ethan. I apologize. You're fighting Dustin Kemp out in Ohio again.
Yes. The Pennsylvania promotions kind of went to shit, man. MMA went under. Pinnacle's not fighting right now. Gladiators of the Cage took a little hiatus. They're supposed to be coming back in 2018, but the word on the street is, but we'll see.
Okay. So
all the shit that's going on is down in Philly area, and man, is it tough to get on a card down there.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the things I learned as going from an amateur to a pro is you got to be able to sell tickets. Because if you can't sell tickets, then there's not much interest in you.
Right. And Ethan Goss can sell tickets. I've seen it.
Coming from Central PA and having to drive 3 hours to Philadelphia or 5 hours to Ohio or 2 hours to Pittsburgh, it gets tough trying to sell a lot of tickets and traveling that far to fight. I don't have the luxury of a lot of these other guys that live in Philly or live in Pittsburgh or live in Ohio. They get to fight right there in their hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we went to Ohio, obviously, to fight Kemp. Kempf had double the amount of fights that I had as a professional. He had a very long career starting back in like 06 or 07. And he was actually a Bellator veteran as well. And, we put in a good training camp for that. And I remember the week of the fight, I just felt so amazing. The weight cut was the best weight cut I ever had. My timing was impeccable. I mean, I was on the money with absolutely everything. And, we went out there and finished that fight in 45 seconds as well.
Outstanding. And, sometimes all this takes is just that, that right camp or that right opportunity to just get your mind back into that winning momentum. And I'm a very big fan of your school you got going on too. And so we've talked over your entire career, Ethan. I mean, clearly we've seen demonstrated, your fights are incredibly important, to Central Pennsylvania and, obviously Pittsburgh, major metropolitan areas, Ohio, and Bellator's coming to the Bryce Jordan Center, November 3rd, I think. Ryan Bader's going to be in the main event. Phil Davis, Ed Ruth, Dominic Mazzata, the Honey Badger fighting out of Pittsburgh, will be fighting. And, what's the word on you fighting on the card?
Francis Healy's actually on the card too.
Okay, the Mad Dog Francis Healy fighting out of the Matt Factory.
Yes, he will be on the card too, and this has been a work in progress for me for the past 3 weeks. But we finally have an opponent, a set opponent, and we are agreed. And I am just waiting for Bellator to send me the contract to fight. So I would say we are on the card.
You heard it here on Cage Nation TV first, ladies and gentlemen. Ethan, the Wolverine Goss, has agreed an opponent. Contracts are we're close to getting them signed. And we'll let you know whenever that's all signed, sealed, and delivered. But Ethan, what's it going to mean to you fighting at the Bryce Jordan Center? Obviously training at Titan, PA. What's that going to mean for you?
For me, it's a dream come true here. I remember sitting down with one of my guys that I trained with, a guy out of State College named AJ Madden. And I remember sitting down with him back when I was an amateur because everybody left the area. A lot of the guys moved out of the area. They went somewhere else to train. They went somewhere else to other gyms and stuff. And I am literally the last fighter standing in Central PA. And a professional fighter, I should say, in Central PA. And for me, I remember when I was an amateur telling AJ that, hey, I want to bring MMA to the area. I want my goal. I want to headline I want to be on a show at the Bryce Jordan Center. Because it doesn't happen here, and it's like finding gold. I mean, it's rare. And here they coming to the Bryce Jordan Center. Thank God for Ruth and thank God for Phil Davis. Helping this go on. And here they come. They're showing up, and I get my shot. I get my chance.
Ethan, if we've never told you before, thank you very much for every fight you've been in, for always putting on a show, for always bringing a lot of interest to the Altoona area. I know that on my side of it, I mean, I've always enjoyed calling all your fights, talking with you, whether it be on camera or cage side, on camera, off camera. It's always been a pleasure, but you've always brought a passion and desire of the sport. And that's going to reflect very, very well. And, all my folks back home in State College, Pennsylvania, there's a lot going on. Ryan Bader, obviously a huge name. Dominic Mazzata, homegrown in Pittsburgh. Francis Healy. I think there's talk about someone else out of Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken. Someone who fights out of Renzo Gracie, Pittsburgh.
Yes, Mike Wilkins. He has already signed to fight Brett Martinez.
Okay, that's confirmed. Mike Wilkins is confirmed.
That is confirmed. Dom Mazzata is actually fighting Matt Lozano, which Lozano and I both fought on that WCC card in the stadium. Mm-hmm. That is confirmed. And then you also have Healy on the card, as well as Mike Putnam.
I almost have to think that someone from Bellator watches Cage Nation TV, because it seems like they went and plucked all my favorite fighters from the Central PA Pittsburgh fight scene, Ethan. I mean, yourself included. You think Scott Coker's...
I don't know, man. I know it's one of them things where it's an opportunity to come and you got to jump on it. And that was what we did as soon as we found out word. And, I told him, you can vouch for me of all people. You've seen how many tickets I can push in Altoona.
Lord.
College is actually it's even closer for me.
What?
And a fight of this magnitude, I'm gonna blow this place up with people.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, Petersburg, where you live in Petersburg, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
Petersburg's on the other side of the mountain from State College, which is not, 20 minutes?
I lived in Pine Grove, and I feel like Petersburg was 20 minutes.
Pine Grove's about 15 minutes from me, if that, 10 minutes from me.
Yeah, and another 15 minutes from there to the Bryce Jordan Center. I mean, it's going to be a real quick jaunt for the Wolverine Nation, without a doubt. Ethan, very best of luck to you, brother. I'm pulling for you. I know we all are. I think it's going to be a huge card for Bellator, and I think it's going to be one of many cards at the Bryce Jordan Center. So congratulations, you've definitely earned the shot. Anything else you wanna get off your chest before we close this up?
No, man, that's pretty much it. For the people that are listening and everybody who wants to come out, whenever we get signed, whenever I sign the contract, contact me. Get your tickets from me. We'll load the place up, and we're going to put on a show. For me, this is an opportunity for me to go out there and put on a show and earn a contract with one of the largest promotions in the world. Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan the Wolverine Goss. He's been a title holder. He's fought the big fights. He's going for the gold. He's going for the brass ring. He's going to be, hopefully, and we'll confirm this in the next couple of days, fighting at the Bryce Jordan Center for Bellator MMA November 3rd with Ryan Bader headlining that card. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today, brother.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you guys from Cage Nation TV.